What's up, everybody, and welcome to a Wednesday edition of Morning Cuppa Hockey presented by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. So use our code NATION, NATION, in all caps. That's Colby Cohen. I'm Johnny Lazarus, and it is a beautiful, beautiful day because the Rangers are back in a playoff spot. When I woke up this morning, which means I will be insufferable until they are not in a playoff spot any longer.
Wait, are you suggesting that you're not normally insufferable? Just
I
curious.
haven't been in a while. I haven't been.
Okay.
But we got a great show for you today. We got Tyler Yaremchuk, who is very, very angry, fresh off an Oilers loss last night at home against the Anaheim Ducks. He'll be on with us here in the next 5 minutes. Then Ken Wiebe, who does an incredible job covering the Winnipeg Jets, will be on a little bit later in the show. We haven't had anyone on this show that covers the Jets, so it'll be a first for us, and we can finally give them their flowers, even though they screwed up our bet of the night.
3 in a row they've lost.
Yeah, they couldn't win in regulation last night. I thought it'd be a get-right game for them, and they couldn't do it. But I see a comment in the chat already. Joe Mama, poor Devils. Devils got killed yesterday online in their game. They come back from down 3-1. They tie it late. Friend of the show, Brett Pesce, scores the goal, and then Thomas Harley, with 3 seconds left, wins it in regulation for the Dallas Stars. So tough day for the New Jersey Devils. Colby, I don't know where you want to start, but I'm going to throw it over to you and just pick your brain. How you feeling this morning?
A lot of the teams that we've been discussing, should you buy, should you sell? I think some of them probably gained a little bit of clarity. I mean, you and I have gone back and forth about the Calgary Flames. You're talking about the New York Rangers being in a playoff spot. So are the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
I mean, they're in a playoff spot. They've got more wins than Vancouver. They beat up the Flyers last night, and I did watch that game because I don't watch Calgary enough. I can admit that. I don't watch them enough. So
there's not a huge draw there though. Who are you tuning in to watch?
Well, I mean, listen, Dustin Wolf is obviously having quite a season, and there's some other guys that are having some good seasons there. But my biggest takeaway was not that the Calgary Flames played really well. It was good to see Morgan Frost with a couple of points last night, get a little retribution against the Flyers. But the big takeaway I had from that game was how Ivan Fedotov is not a National Hockey League goaltender. I just can't understand how any Flyers fan cannot be burying their head in their hands when they think about the fact that this guy is making $3.5 million, and he is the only goalie I've ever seen who's 9 feet tall, who gets beat up high like he's 4'10". I mean, the guy plays so small. He plays so small. And you look at the trade that Kyle Davidson just made for Spencer Knight, and I know the returns are still early on that, but I don't know. Maybe the Flyers should have been a little more aggressive and try to go out and get Spencer Knight before Chicago did, because they got a goaltending problem per usual in Philadelphia. Again, I know we started with Calgary. I'm already shifted to Philly, but
whatever. Bounce around.
Just my biggest takeaway last night from watching that game is that he can't play. He just can't play. And the other guy, Kolozov, he can't play either. You got 2 Russian goaltenders who can't stop the puck, which is usually a strength for the Russians, but not for these 2 guys.
Yeah, no, listen, I don't know what the Flyers are going to do about goaltending, and maybe they make a trade with Chicago now that they have those 4 goalies, and they probably have to get rid of one. But if you are the Flyers, are you looking for another young goalie, or are you looking for someone who's established in the NHL? Like where's John Gibson going? We talk about Scott Lawton's name coming up every year. So does John Gibson's. Which one of them will get traded first?
I think Lawton will go this year. I think for sure. I think he'll go this year. Yeah. This is the year. I think it's actually finally going to happen. So, what does Philly need in goal? I mean, look, Sam Erson's not a bad goalie, but he's not a 1. He's kind of a 1A, 1B type of guy. So you got to find a partner with Erson, Sam Erson, who can play 50% of the games and give you a chance to win. I see somebody Jake said, what about Thatcher Demko? it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Thatcher Demko in the offseason. But I would think a lot of teams would be looking for his services as long as, his health is there.
Mhm.
Here's another guy I think we haven't spoken about at all that I just want to throw out there as we wait for Tyler. Brandt Clark in LA, the defenseman.
I keep seeing his name all over Twitter for trades.
The mistreatment of this guy and the way that Rob Blake has dragged him around and the guy hasn't been playing. He's got more points than any other defenseman. They went 11-7 the other day and they still didn't play him. He's a dynamic offensive defenseman and LA can't score goals. So why do they not have Brandt Clark in the lineup? Like, if I'm Brandt Clark, I'm saying I want to trade. I want out of here because it just seems like no matter what Clark does, he's not getting an opportunity to play in LA. And I do see you guys letting us know about
Olivier in Columbus.
Olivier. Vic actually hit us a couple of minutes ago and told us that he got a 6-year extension at $3 million per season. Yeah, I mean, listen,
I just think he's become like a heart and soul guy of Columbus. Like, I think that's just a guy who lives and breathes Columbus Blue Jackets. To me, that's just them.
Let me ask you this, and I'm going to compare it a little bit to like Barclay Goodrow, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
When do those contracts for fourth liners, those 6-year low AAV contracts, when do they ever age well? They never do. But they always figure, you know what? We'll give them the years. It'll get the AAV down, and then we'll deal with it later when it doesn't cost us anything.
Yeah.
But I feel like anytime we see a 6-year deal for anywhere from like $1.8 to $3 million, it never ages well for a bottom 6 player.
I'm trying to think of another one in like recent memory.
You guys in the chat, let us know what you guys think. What 6-year or long-term fourth line contract aged well? I'd be curious if you guys can come up with a couple. Engvall's a great one.
I feel like the Islanders.
Matthew Heiss just put that one. Engvall. That's a great example. Give him a long-term deal for low AAV. And then you have nothing to. Oh, he got 7 years, Engvall. I thought it was 6, but
I think Casey Cizikas is a good one. I mean, I don't know how many years his deal. It was probably like 7. He makes 2.5. Like,
I think Casey Cizikas has been okay. That one's been okay. Nick Paul. I wouldn't quite say Nick Paul's a fourth liner though, and I know you said that too, Seth. He got a long deal with low money. I don't know. It was just something that kind of came to mind. Someone said Mitch Garner.
Casey Cizikas got 6 years, $2.5 million. I think that's a really good deal.
Yeah, he's stayed in his identity all the time. But let's get to Tyler. Why don't you read him in so we don't make him wait? He's up early for us, so we don't want to keep him waiting too long, Johnny. But don't forget, once you read him in, it's very early in Alberta. Ask him how his morning's going. Okay,
I'm gonna ask it in his own words. Okay. So before we bring Tyler on, just want to give a quick word from our sponsor, Proraso, the most complete choice for shaving and beard care, made in Italy since 1948. Proraso has been a staple of Italian culture in barbershops globally for 4 generations. So get 15% off at Proraso-USA.com with our promo code Hockey15 in all caps, Hockey15. And to take your own words from you, Tyler, what the fuck is going on?
Oh, yeah, I'm really miserable right now. My alarm went off at 7 a.m. and I was like, why the hell is that going off? And I snoozed it and then I laid back down and I was like, oh, fuck, I got to be on Morning Cup of Hockey. But yeah, no, I'm not doing great.
We appreciate you hopping on this morning, and obviously a tough loss last night for your Oilers, but also we got to make note, the Western Conference wildcard race is kind of heating up. Like, all the talk's been about the East, but now Anaheim, who beats Edmonton last night, is just 6 points back of the second wildcard spot. Like, there are 5 teams actually competing for that second spot now. I'd say Colorado is probably a lock to make it, but Calgary, Vancouver, St. Louis, Utah, and Anaheim, like, the Ducks aren't really that bad of a team. I don't know how you felt watching last night.
No, they're really not. And they've got some pretty impressive wins over the last number of weeks here as well. But I mean, that's still a team the Oilers shouldn't be losing to. But yeah, the Western Conference playoff race, like it is good. I feel like in the past few years, and this has been true in the East too, it's been like kind of sealed up by this point in the season, or maybe there's like 2 teams still in it. So to still have a group of 5 like firmly and squarely in the mix is good. And it's also complicated the deadline because no one wants to sell.
Well, listen, Tyler, I can tell you this. I'm not enjoying the downfall of the Edmonton Oilers. It brings me no joy because I think when the Edmonton Oilers are going, they're as entertaining of a group because of obvious factors as any team. But I'll start with this, and I know you're emotionally angry right now after last night's game, which I understand. But I'm going to ask you to kind of go back and go to 10,000 feet. What is your legitimate concern level? If a 1 is I'm not concerned at all, and a 10 is we have a major season-ending problem here, where are you actually? Because I know it's easy to get caught up in the moment, but you still have a couple of really good players that can do a lot of really good things.
Yeah, I think I'm somewhere around a 7, if I'm being totally honest, just because, I mean, this isn't a week of them playing bad. I believe they're the worst team in the NHL since the start of February, and I know the 4 Nations break makes that feel like a larger sample size than it is, but they are like right around there of being one of the worst teams in the league over the last 5-6 weeks here. So the part of the concern is just that there seem to be so many problems with this team. Like, John Klingberg is not an NHL defenseman. That experiment has not worked, and now you have him on the books for $1.7 million. Every gamble they took this offseason has absolutely blown up in their face. Victor Arvidsson is terrible, and I have some serious thoughts about him.
With the no-move clause.
Oh, yeah, and like the rumblings around that, like maybe he's asking for a trade, maybe he wants out, but his list is very small of where he'd be willing to go, and it's like, Jesus Christ, dude, either you don't want to be here and you want to, again, either you recognize it's not working here, so then go. Just say, you know what, forget my no movement clause. It's not working here. I'm out. If you're sitting there and saying, I want out, but I also want to go to a contender, you're on a contender. Just play better. Like, they gave you $4 million. Just play better. He is awful. Like, the decisions he makes, he'll just one-time pucks from the top of the zone. No traffic in front, nothing. He'll just be like, this one's going on net. And the goalie stops it easily. It's ridiculous. They won't play Jeff Skinner, even though he has more goals than pretty much every forward not named Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl. Zach Hyman is a shell of his former self. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins may as well not be playing right now. Adam Henrique has 8 goals. He's making $3 million a year. Like, I can just keep going, man. Every forward is playing absolutely, with the exception of Leon Draisaitl. And finally, last night, Connor McDavid woke up for the first time in, I think, 6 weeks. So 11 of their 12 forwards on a nightly basis are not doing anything productive. Their blue line has a massive gaping hole in it, and they can't get a save.
And so, isn't it interesting? I just want to make a comment on something he said, Johnny, and then you can ask the next question. But isn't it so interesting, Tyler, when you watch a player from afar on another team and you really like them, like Victor Arvidsson? Like, everybody liked Victor Arvidsson. Like, everybody was like, oh my God, players want to go to Edmonton. This is such a good thing. Victor Arvidsson, secondary scoring. I said that. And then you get him into your bubble and you watch him every day, like you now do, and you watch him up close and personal, and you're like, whoa, like maybe he had a lot of makeup on, or like, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, oh, geez, you know, like you get to see what's underneath the hood, and you lift up the hood of that old car that you thought was running nicely. It's not running nicely. I feel like that happens to every fan base.
But so, like with Arvidsson, he came back at the end of the year last season for the LA Kings and scored 6 goals in 18 games. A year before that, he had 26 goals in 77 games. He scored 7 times in 46 games so far this season. Like, it's just mind-blowing how ineffective he is. Like, he doesn't forecheck particularly well. He doesn't go to the net particularly well. And yeah, I guess it's kind of like what you said, but like, you look at his stat lines from previous years, and I guess his minutes are down by about 90 seconds a game. What up, Oliver? I guess his minutes are down by about 90 seconds a game. But like, watching Victor Arvidsson, and it's just, how did he ever score anywhere else if he was this kind of a player? Like, it's very, very confusing to me. I like to think I am somewhat of a smart hockey fan, and I watched him a decent amount with the LA Kings the last few years. And it's like, Like he falls down more than he scores goals. Like he'll just be skating and just fall and have to like get up and be like, whoa, where am I? It's insane.
You are somewhat of a smart hockey fan. I will agree with you on that somewhat.
I agree. I think we're never mind. I do want to read. I was just saying, I think we're similar in our hockey fandom, but Colby gives you more credit than me. Just
Tyler's way smarter than you when it comes to hockey. It's not even close.
But I do want to read some numbers just to back up your sentiments, Tyler, because the Edmonton Oilers are in fact the worst team in the NHL since February 1st. They have the least amount of points. They're 3-7-0. They've given up 42 goals in their last 10 games, and they're minus 13 in their goal differential. But the thing about that too is that Connor McDavid is minus 13. The rest of the team, no one is even above a minus 10. Connor McDavid being minus 13 is bizarre over his last 10 games. When do you ever see him, that deep in the negative category, even though he has 10 points in those 10 games? And I know not everyone cares about plus minus, but that is a little bit alarming. A player like that who's always on the ice for more goals for than against is that deep in the hole in the last 10 games.
Yeah, really, really concerning. I will say last night against Anaheim, he was back to being, and I tweeted about it. He was back to being vintage McDavid. His first 3-4 shifts of the game when the Oilers eventually, or when they did find the back of the net, I think he had 4 really quality, good rushes. 3 of them resulted in grade A looks. Connor McDavid was back to buzzing last night. And one thing that I will say about McDavid is he would have left for 4 Nations on February 8th. He's obviously in Montreal and Boston for that whole stretch. And then the Oilers had a 5-game road trip right out of the gates that he had to meet the team in Philadelphia. So he was on the road for essentially a month, basically 4 straight weeks. So I do feel for him a little bit in that. And I was cutting him a bit of slack on the road trip. To see him on home ice last night play the way he did, it's kind of that almost brings down my number a bit. I'm like, all right, Connor's going to be okay. That is good. But the other problems are obviously still so alarming. Again, you look at a guy like Adam Henrique, who was a top line player in Anaheim for a couple of seasons. Granted, they weren't all that good, but he was still playing those minutes and producing in that spot. And you sign that guy going, all right, third liner, that problem is finally solved. The depth scoring issues in Edmonton should go away. And then it's Groundhog Day. It's every year. It's they can't score when McDavid or Draisaitl are off the ice. Oh, they can't defend. Oh, the goaltending's bad. It's ridiculous.
Well, what's also crazy, last year we were saying this was the best team that Connor McDavid has had on paper in his career. And it's not like they made that many changes, right? Maybe 3 guys left over the summer? And Broberg, Holloway, who else really departed? I guess
Desharnais and CC
been out. Yeah. But
so there are a few guys missing. Yeah, there are a few guys missing, but it's not that different of a team, especially when, again, you consider that they brought in guys that on paper, when you look at them traditionally, should be replacements. Again, Victor Arvidsson should be able to give you what Warren Fogle gave you. Adam Henrique should be able to give you what Ryan McLeod gave you. And you can go down the list here. I've really liked Ty Emberson this year, but he's not as good of a penalty killer as Cody Ceci and Vinny Desharnais are. So yeah, again, the list is long. That's why my number is high, and it kind of gets you to start thinking, they lost in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, and the feeling around Edmonton, and I even think the feeling around the league a little bit was those Oilers, they'll find a way to get back. Don't you worry. And that's not how this works. It's hard to get to where the Oilers got to. They almost lost in round 2 to the Vancouver Canucks. So I'm really starting to think that this just ain't their year, man, and it's going to be a real big disappointment, and they'll have to regroup in the summer.
Let me ask you this question: do you think Stuart Skinner's your opening night starter in the playoffs, or do you think over the next couple of days, Stan Bowman and the powers to be are able to make a move and goaltend, and then who's that guy? Who's realistically that guy? Because you kind of think about some of the names that might be available. Are they really upgrades? I don't know. I want your point of view on that.
Yeah. So I would say it's more likely than not Stuart Skinner's your game 1 starter when you take on the LA Kings once again in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, because that feels like it's happening now, because there's no way you're catching Vegas. And I think you kind of nailed it. Who's out there? Okay, Jordan Binnington, $6 million for 2 more years.
Gibson.
If you can find a way to fit him in, I can justify it and understand it. And he's the hot name right now. But
Big game winner.
If Austin Matthews just gets the puck elevated to the top of the net in overtime of that Four Nations faceoff, how are we viewing Jordan Binnington right now?
Yeah, but he didn't.
Yeah, but come on, man.
Nah, he didn't.
If things were different, they'd be different.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Jordan Binnington's value is through the roof right now because he played 7 good minutes of hockey in overtime. Come on. If he gives up a goal in OT, he's a choke artist, and it's a mistake that Canada even picked him, and he's not big game Binnington. So I get what you're saying, that he did make those saves. He deserves credit for them, sure. But I don't want the Oilers to give up a first-round pick because Jordan Binnington had one good overtime in front of an all-star team.
Well, guess what? Jordan Binnington also had one good Game 7 of the Cup final, and guess who didn't?
Okay, but I'm looking at his sample size over the last 3 seasons, Johnny. He hasn't been above a 900 for those years, and that's what we're roasting Stuart Skinner for. And the thing I always find funny is the Oilers goalies get caved for being under 900, and then people also be like, and their blue line sucks. Okay, St. Louis's blue line has Colton Parayko and all these other guys. Jordan Binnington can't get above 900 playing in front of those guys. I'm not sold on him being a solution. I'm definitely not sold on an aging John Gibson who can't stay healthy and again has been below a 905 each of the past 4 or 5 seasons. I don't want to give up assets for John Gibson because he's been good for 30 games playing in a tandem. I don't see a slam dunk fit out there. And again, unless there's someone that I'm not thinking of and we're not talking about that is truly available on the market, again, Vitek Vanacek is sitting out for trade-related reasons. I'm shivering in fear that the Oilers are going to acquire Vitek bleeping Vanacek, man. I don't see the guy out there. I think they're just gonna, I hope, spend big and go get a really, really good defenseman and just be like, hey, we're gonna limit chances as best we can and hope Stuart Skinner gets hot for a couple of weeks or a couple of months because that's all you're gonna need.
Well, that's kind of the Frank, school of thought on building your team is you just build in front of the goaltender and then piece it together on the back end. Look, Skinner's been good in playoffs before. He's made saves. I mean, if we're going to play the whole, Binnington, and I do disagree with you to an extent. I thought Binnington was good the whole gold medal game, not just the overtime, just, to give you a little bit of pushback there. But so if that's the case, then who's your target on the back end? Realistically, a player that they have the assets and the money to acquire, not the, Johnny Sunshine and Rainbows fantasy land, who you want them to retire.
The fuck did I do?
What are you saying fuck me for?
What did I do?
I think the realistic part of that is important. There isn't a Matthias Ekholm level guy out there. When he popped up on the market a few years ago, it was apparent. It was that guy needs to be an Edmonton Oiler, and Ken Holland paid the price, made it happen. I don't see that name out there. I don't mind Mario Ferraro, who's on Frank's trade targets board. Lefty, cost controlled, even if he costs you a little bit more. And again, the Oilers don't have their first. Yeah, the Oilers don't have their first round pick this year. They only have their first round pick next year to trade from. So if they're going to be giving up a first round pick, I think you need to get someone who you can point to next year and go, okay, we don't have our first to deal with at this deadline, but we have this guy in our lineup. So I like Ferraro, but my guy's still Alexiak, actually. I love his size. I think the Oilers aren't nearly hard enough to play against. They need someone who can clear the front of the net. They need someone who can penalty kill. Alexiak checks a lot of those boxes for me. So it's not the sexiest ad. It's not Matthias Ekholm, but I like Alexiak.
You're missing the right name, in my opinion. And the right name is rumored to be coming to your province, but not to your team. Brandon Carlo. That to me is more of an upgrade than anybody you just mentioned, in my opinion. I've always been a Brandon Carlo fan. I think he takes a lot of heat. I just have generally watched probably more Boston Bruin hockey in the last 5 years than most other teams. Not so much this year because they are just hard to watch. They're so boring the way that they play. I think Brandon Carlo is a real good defenseman. I mean, he is defensively sound, not overly physical, but he's kind of like a less physical,
I'd say. No?
Yeah, I don't think he's real physical. He's a little less physical than Ekholm, but I see a lot of similarities in the tool the tools that they have. So that for me, Tyler, would be the name I'd be looking at. I would not let the Calgary Flames go out and get Brandon Carlo. If I'm Stan Bowman, I'm getting on the phone with Don Sweeney, and I'm just trying to think of the history there while Stan was in Chicago. If they did much business together, I'd have to go back and really look, because these GMs, they have different relationships and different people they prefer to work with on these types of deals. But that's where I would go with it if I was you, Tyler.
Yeah, we got a comment in the chat from Mike Renell. Carlo been legit awful this season.
His numbers are like weirdly outlier bad, so maybe you'd get him for cheap. And the reason I didn't include Carlo, because he kind of was my guy. I wrote about him over on the site earlier in the week. They just did a deal with Boston yesterday, so my assumption is if they wanted Carlo, they would have got Carlo in that deal and paid the price all at the same time. So right shot guy, cost controlled, under 30. I would have really liked Brandon Carlo. I'm just assuming that's not happening now because, again, they already made the deal. But, hey, it's happened in the past. The Oilers' previous regime, granted, they've made 2 trades with one team in the GM period, so maybe.
And I'll lean on G for that, because I know he watches more Bruins than me this year. But, again, I think, he said it best. The guy needs a change of scenery, but he's a good defenseman. He's a good top 4 NHL defenseman with a really reasonable cap hit, in my opinion. Go ahead, Johnny.
No, I was just gonna say, Tyler, we didn't even ask you about the trade yesterday. Your initial thoughts on getting Trent Frederic, and are you sad to see a friend of ours that, well, I don't know if you don't think you met him, but Shane LeChance, I was convincing him the whole time we did the haircut interview about how great Edmonton is, and now he's gone. So what'd you make of the deal?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you ruined their chances of signing him, but that's fine. That's fine. I'll forgive you for that.
He ruined Lafreniere's career too, so he's a big ruiner this year.
I'm just kidding around, obviously, but I don't mind the deal. I like Trent Frederic. I don't love that he's hurt right now. I wish he was playing, but again, they need more jam. I actually think he could end up being a somewhat decent fit in the Oilers' top 6, just because Leon Draisaitl loves playing with disruptors, guys that push defensemen back on the forecheck, create turnovers, and just open up all that space higher up in the zone, which is really where Leon Draisaitl works well. I know people think and see him do the reverse checks and all that, but he is his most dangerous when there's space in the top of the zone for him to cut back. So I think Trent Frederic, could work really well with Leon Draisaitl. Again, do you like giving up a 2nd and Max Wanner and a 4th and Shane LeChance? No, that's a lot to give up. It's a lot of assets, but it's the deadline. You always have to overpay to get guys. So they saw their guy, they liked their guy. And I don't think Shane LeChance was ever signing here.
I was just going to say to you, he's a free agent in August. He wasn't going to sign. He wasn't. He's from Massachusetts. His dad has been the head scout and the head U.S. scout for the Devils for a long time. It's unfortunate because he's going to play in the NHL. Yeah. I've watched Shane play a lot. Now, I personally, I think he's probably going to sign after this year, because he wouldn't have been in that trade, because he still becomes a free agent in August this year if he doesn't sign. I think he should stay for another year of college. It doesn't appear that's the case, but I do think he becomes a bottom 6 forward in the NHL and has a long career as just a Jay Pandolfo type of player, like a penalty killer, a third liner. Maybe he chips in. He's got to work on his skating, but you're not going to get the guy in Edmonton. So why hang on to him? I mean, get anything in return for him is better than nothing.
Yeah, totally. The Shane LeChance part of this is kind of whatever. Giving up Max Wanner, I think he projects to be an NHLer. He'll play NHL games. I was thinking he was going to play some NHL games this year, but his development got stunted a bit and he got hurt down in Bakersfield. But again, it's a little bit much to give up. Whatever, it's the trade deadline. The people who sit there and complain about how much their teams give up are the same people who would sit there and bitch and moan if their teams didn't do anything. So if you want to get into the dance, you got to buy a ticket, and tickets are expensive.
Tyler, you were on the money today. I just got one more question for you before we get to Ken Wiebe. Colby, you have anything before we kind of let Tyler go here? My last thought is just do you even care where the Oilers finish, though, in the regular season? Because, I mean, it's going to be a gauntlet to get to where they got to get to anyway. So does it even matter with the seeding?
I get what you're saying. There is a part of me, coming into the year, I was you need to go assert dominance, go win the
Care, I feel like the first month.
I know, but I wanted the Oilers to get the number 1 seed and get home ice for as long as they could, because I believe the Stanley Cup final plays out differently if it starts in Edmonton instead of Florida. I think there's a Stanley Cup banner if they're the number 1 seed last year and they can start that series in Edmonton, and game 7 is happening in Edmonton. So once that ship has kind of sailed, them winning the division for the first time in my life, they have the longest divisional drought, I think, amongst teams who are not expansion teams of like this century. Like, they haven't won the division since 1990. I would have liked to see them win the division. That doesn't look like it's going to happen either now. So yeah, I really don't care anymore. I just want to see them play well. You need to peak at the right time. You need to shake off whatever the hell is going on right now and the malaise that's affecting this team. And then again, year 4, let's go beat the shit out of the LA Kings one more time.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Tyler. We appreciate it this morning. Seriously, I know you're waking up early for us, so it means the world that you hopped on.
Real quick, anything special for DFO Live the next couple of days, or just kind of status quo leading into the trade deadline show?
Frank is all the special we need. That is what we have. Frank's insider knowledge and me.
Yeah. Has he slept?
I have no idea. Probably not. No, he just keeps his phone on full ring overnight. So, I mean, if you were to like schedule him a text or an email to go at like 3 a.m., it would wake him up.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
We probably should we should probably do something like that tonight. All right, Tyler, have a good rest of your day,
thanks,
man.
Tyler.
Really appreciate you coming on.
Okay, bye guys.
Bye. I don't know why I said that.
I do, but I won't say it out loud because I don't want to.
All right, let's not waste any time and bring on first time guest of the show. Ken Wiebe does an awesome job covering the Winnipeg Jets. Are you on Long Island right now?
No, spitting distance from MSG. Stayed downtown and just took the Long Island Railroad. Yeah, I got to add to the adventure, guys, when you're around, right? So it's a fun time of year. How's everything going here?
Everything's good. Everything's good.
We're doing a very Canadian themed show today, Ken. Obviously, we spent a lot of time with Tyler talking about the Edmonton Oilers, but you're in New York today, which you're riding around on the Lear. You're taking subways.
The Lear? No one's ever called it the Lear.
I can only imagine the things that you've seen going on down there the last couple of days. Probably just like Winnipeg, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great life here, right? Riding the Amtrak, got a full planes, trains, and automobiles for this trip, but it's a fun week ahead, and not the angst level is not quite the same as in Edmonton, I guess, coming out of the break. But if a 3-game winless streak qualifies as angst-ridden, that's the way it goes when a team rattles off an 11-game winning streak before that. So it's an interesting time for the Jets.
So let me ask you that question. Do you think the Jets have lost 3 in a row on purpose so they can add some pieces at the deadline? They can't get too hot too early, right? Like, you want to bring in some more firepower here on Friday, no?
Johnny, I know you're kidding, but yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? So at the time when the theme became, the Jets better not add because they're too cohesive of a group. I mean, let's not kid ourselves, guys. I mean, the Jets were always adding, or they should be adding. And this is the time of year when things kind of get floated out there, which makes the antenna rise, right? So for me, when the theme in the media becomes the Jets are just looking for depth pieces around the periphery, that's when I think Kevin Cheveldayoff is trying to take a big swing, right? I mean, we know that the things happen around this week, and what is true today is not necessarily true 15 minutes from now based on one phone call. I think the Jets were always looking to add, and again, I'm not here saying the Jets are looking at Mikko Rantanen, but I do think that their needs are quite evident. They're going to want to add a second line center if they can. Vlad Domestikov has been totally fine in that role and very effective for the most part, but we saw in the game yesterday, Brock Nelson, when engaged and playing his best hockey, would Brock Nelson make the Jets more of a Stanley Cup contender? Absolutely he would. He does all of the things that Paul Stastny and Sean Monahan before him do well. He's a very smart player, strong on the puck, incredibly engaged. He plays in all situations, penalty kill, power play, even strength. 20-goal guy chasing 30. I mean, would he look good beside Nikolai Ehlers and Cole Perfetti? Of course he would. Are the Jets a better team if Vlad Domestikov's on the 3rd line or the 4th line? Of course they are. And then when it comes to the defense, again, yesterday is another great example. So to your point, Johnny, I mean, when Logan Stanley moves into the top 4 when Dylan Sandberg is away for family reasons, it's a reminder that the Jets should add at least one defenseman for the third pairing, and probably a guy that can play in the second pairing if required. Like last year when Brendan Dillon got hurt at the end of game 3, they needed more depth for that defense core, even though the Jets are still one of the stingiest, if not the stingiest team in the NHL.
So let me ask you this. It feels like in previous years, Ken, Winnipeg's always out in front of the trade deadline. I feel like they've made their, and again, maybe I'm misremembering and it was only
Foley,
1 year,
I think they brought in early, right?
the last couple of years, they've got out in front of it a little bit, haven't they?
Monahan for sure. Monahan was at the break last year, but Toffoli was late, and the Stastny deal I think was the day before, and even when they got Kevin Hayes, it was pretty close. So I don't see that as a red flag, and I would even say, Colby, part of the reason the Jets are kind of going for the late ad rather than the preemptive strike, first because we know how many teams are in it, and the sellers haven't quite fully distinguished themselves, but also what we saw last year, they added late because they didn't want to. They went to the expanded roster last year. They didn't want to lose Gustafsson or Kapari or Logan Stanley either in a deal or to waivers. So they carried above the max. So, they have all this projected cap space, but that cap space diminishes if you're looking at a 25-man roster compared to 23. So I don't think it's a red flag, and I don't necessarily think it's I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I don't think it's a suggestion that they're not going to add because they've waited late.
That's where I was going, and I'm glad you would remember it a heck of a lot better than I would. Look, Ken, I feel like, and I don't think this is unfair, but I think I've fallen victim to this, as I think probably all Winnipeg fans have fallen victim to this, and I really saw it when I was working in Chicago and we'd play against Winnipeg early in the year, and I'd be like, just give these guys the cup. There's nobody even remotely as good as them. Then we'd see them later in the early springtime, and it's like, whoa, this doesn't look like the same team. Because they're on a 3-game losing streak right now, are people starting to get a little uptight and start to feel the angst of are they going to cut this off, or is this going to drag on? Because I know that's my first thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally fair, right? The narrative around the Jets is that they're, fast starters and front runners, and when things get hard, things, sort of go the other direction. And they're a team that gets to structure quickly. So they take advantage of teams that have either brought in new pieces or are sort of looking for an identity, because the Jets have a lot of continuity. They have the same core, they play the same style. But Colby, the counter argument to that is that this is really only year 3 of their structural side of things. And if you look at all of those past champions, they were offense first teams that learned how to play defense, going back to Tampa Bay, and then even Colorado, right? So these are teams that had to really go through some heartache and struggle. So to me, it's more about lessons learned and being around the team as regularly as I am, it feels different. So obviously the warning signs would be natural. The only way you change a narrative by doing the things to change the narrative. So the other thing about the Jets too, Colby, they won, they did have some struggles in January and February and even part of March, but then they ripped off an 8-game winning streak to end the year, but they still had the same result as the year previous, where they won, the gentleman's sweep, win the first, lose the next 4. So, I mean, when it comes to crunch time, that is something that is going to have to change around here. If the Jets want to go deep, like in 2018, they're going to have to be able to respond to hard losses. But I would say to both you guys, the Jets actually they played better yesterday on the island than they did in, probably both of the wins over St. Louis and Ottawa, where they needed to get a 6-on-5 goal and then either go to overtime or a shootout. Mm-hmm. So this isn't a rose-colored glasses type of thing. They had a couple of big structural breakdowns in the game, one on the penalty kill and the turnover at 5-on-5, and then sort of a sort out that didn't quite get worked out on the goals. But overall, the Jets looked more like themselves yesterday, even though they suffered another 1-goal defeat here. It's been wild, guys. 7 of the last 9 1-goal games, and in 4 of the last 5, they've scored 2 or fewer, which is odd for a team that, again, has been among the highest scoring teams in the NHL. But Colby, I don't see the same parallels as in previous years where sort of the roof has caved in on these guys. And I would say it's more to do with the fact that the commitment to structure in the first year under Rick Bowness, excellent structure for 55 or 60, and then it really tailed off. And then they completely abandoned it after winning game 1 against Vegas. Last year was more of a commitment throughout the whole year. And this year, They have been committed the whole way. It just right now the offensive well has run a little bit dry, and part of that was a league leading penalty kill that I think went 0 for 17 before finally getting 2 yesterday. But now find the magic formula for the 5-on-5 scoring, which is sort of dried up a little bit as well. You guys watch the Four Nations closely.
Yeah.
Kyle Connor's come out of the break, high shot volume, high shot attempts, but he's only got 1 goal. Now he's getting a bunch of points, but it's a long time for a pure sniper and one of the best goal scorers in the league to go with only 1 in about 8 games here. So, and Niederreiter 1 in his last 14. This is a consistent 20 goal guy. Start of the year, guys, we were talking about that Adam Lowry line being one of the best third lines in hockey.
Yeah.
Their offensive well has gone a little bit dry. Also still doing the things physically. We saw Adam Lowry with the tilt with Anders Lee yesterday, but there just hasn't been as much offense there. And again, this is a team that it has elite goaltending. Their defensive structure is very sound. Their top power play is at the top, but right now they're just going through that stretch where the goals have been a little bit more difficult to come by. And hey, Scott O'Neill said it yesterday, Colby, if they have to win games 1-0, that's what they're going to have to do to kind of fight their way through it. But I think they're still going to the hard areas. They're just sort of a combination of maybe a little bit snake bitten and maybe needing to spend a little bit more time around the blue paint and making it a little bit tougher on the opposition netminder.
And it's the most NHL hockey thing of all time for a team to be on like a 12 games that they won in a row?
11. Yeah,
11 in a row and then lose to the Predators.
Well, and normally, listen, normally
it happens all the time.
When you get in a long winning streak, Johnny, and I know you had coaches that said that, Ken. I know you've heard coaches say this. Towards the end of a winning streak, you usually stop playing that well. And there's about 2 to 3 games before the winning streak ends. You win a game that you weren't bad, but you weren't great. And then it's usually 1 or 2 games at the end of the streak where your power play bails you out, but you didn't play well, or your goalie stands on his head and you were terrible and you don't deserve to win. And that's usually when that happens. I mean, it is the most hockey karma, hockey god, human nature thing in the sport. And every coach I ever played for said the exact same thing with that, is that, yeah, we probably didn't deserve to win the last 1 or 2 of that winning streak. And that's why we're kind of in the little rut we're in now.
Yeah, Colby, bang on. And the other part of that equation is, quite honestly, Connor Hellebuyck playing at an all-world level worthy of heart consideration. When you have that goalie, it's hard to get goalied, right? Let's get real here, right? I mean, and honestly, up until games, 58 to 62, I can't remember a ton of times where the guy standing in the other crease was better than Connor Hellebuyck. And even a lot of the nights, Eric Comrie was solid in his starts as well, even though he hasn't had any run support. So, and again, too, the other thing that's kind of weird, guys, about the streak sort of starting and then being disrupted is not a lot of 11-game winning streaks have a 2-week break in the middle of them either, right? Where, 3 of the top players on the team were involved at the Four Nations. So I didn't see as many of the warning signs, Colby, at the end. But again, there's always going to be games where maybe the deserve to win meter is a little bit lower than it should be. And teams kind of the old quote unquote find a way to win. But there haven't, like I said, I don't think that it's a matter of the Jets getting back to bad habits, or, as my podcast partner Sean Reynolds likes to say, snake charmer hockey. And Colby, you saw it in the days when you were covering the Jets in Chicago. They played a lot of the time on the perimeter, and if they weren't scoring off the rush, they weren't scoring.
Yeah.
And that's not the way that they play anymore. They still can score off the rush and take advantage of odd mans, but they've become a much more balanced team and a team that can score in many different ways. And right now it's just kind of not going for them. But again, I don't see, you could put up a caution flag, but I don't see red flags around the group just yet. But that's the beauty of it. 20 games to show who you are. And the other thing, Colby, that I would say too for the Jets lately, as much as you're playing for the President's Trophy, it's hard to have, artificially muster up the desperation level of teams like the Flyers and Islanders, who are literally fighting for their playoff lives, where, the Jets went in a couple of games ago. They had a double-digit lead in their own division. Now that has shrunk given how the way the Dallas Stars have played, but it's really hard. You can say everything you want, and the Jets are saying all the right things. They've got lots to play for in the division, in the conference, in the league, but you can't have the same level of desperation and urgency when you're kind of home and cooled the way that they are. That's not to say that they're, easing back on the throttle, but they're going to have to match the intensity of those hungry teams, or else, things can continue to slide. But I just don't see that as being an issue. I don't see this team kind of sleepwalking through the last 20 games. And it's interesting, guys. I spoke with Brad Marchand earlier in the year when the Jets were in the midst of that 15-1 start. And he was talking about the year where they were so unbelievable, but lost in the first round. And he even said to me, it's probably good for the Jets. Like, I spoke with him during when the Jets were in that 3-7 run that came out of 15-1. And he said, based on what happened to them, probably good to have some tension and, some challenges and adversity that you have to battle through. And I think that it's better to have adversity in games 59-62 than to have it not show up until game 2 or 3 of the playoffs. And the next thing you know, you blink and you're out of the tournament and you're wondering what the hell just happened. So going through some struggles on the power play and goal scoring, those are things you need, because it's going to be tight checking hockey for the rest of the way. It's going to be heavy hockey. So you have to respond if you want to have success. And, we know how hard it is to win 16 games. The best roster that the Jets had previous to this one, they won 9 playoff games. That's 7 short of the ultimate goal. So, and they've won 1 series since. So, we'll see how they respond. But this is a team that's been very motivated. And I suspect that motivation will continue to be high in the last 20 here, guys.
Well, speaking of that motivation, I remember when they were here, and it must have been like game 17 or 18, right? It was pretty early in the year still when they were on that hot streak. And I was talking to Nikolai Ehlers, and he was saying that, and I referenced this on the show before, but his message was, we didn't think we needed a change in personnel. We thought we needed a change in mentality. We were embarrassed last year the way we went out. Like, he flat out said that to me in the locker room. And, when you're going to add at the deadline, you also have a guy, I think back to last year, and someone who's really played well this year and had a great year last year before getting hurt, and Gabriel Velarde. Like, to me, him being healthy, he's a guy that's never talked about, right? He's got 26 goals. I think he finished the year with 26 goals last year in like 47 games before going down. Like, this guy can flat out score, and he's the guy around the blue paint as well, right, that you were talking about before. I mean, how big is it just having him healthy right now, that I feel like that goes so under the radar for what they were missing last year?
Yeah, it's so funny, Johnny, right? When you have 2 30-goal guys so early as the Jets did, it's hard to forget about. It's easy to forget for some people who don't watch the Jets regularly to look at the guy who has 26. He had 22 in 47 games last year, and it was always a matter of him just needing to be healthy. And again, he's done a great job to keep himself ready and in the lineup. And, Colby sees this a lot, right? With the tips, the ability to tip and be around the blue paint. The puck needs to be in his hands on the power play. So yesterday, the power play goal is the reverse Gabe Velarde, the drop back move cut to the front from Ehlers. That's a play that they worked on a lot on the other side of the the umbrella power play, and he's just been really good. I mean, he does a lot of the heavy lifting on that line too with Scheifele and Connor. I mean, those guys have played together forever. It seems like 8 or 9 years together. Velarde's a guy who wins so many board battles, puck battles along the wall. He's a guy who he's worked hard on his shot. He wants to score from distance. That was one of his goals, because a lot of his goals come around the blue paint area. He's a guy, not a huge hitter, but a guy who's heavy on the puck. So that element is really important when you have 2 really skilled guys who love to play a possession game the way that Mark and Kyle do. With churning in the offensive zone. And we don't often talk about skilled lines having cycle shifts, but that's what makes them really effective, in addition to their ability to score off the rush and on the power play. But Velarde's been fantastic, and hey, good time to be producing career highs when you're an RFA looking for a new deal, right? Yeah.
Well, look, and that's really the last thing we're going to ask you about is really not trade deadline focused, but Johnny has no idea how to structure an interview. Ken, he doesn't realize it's supposed to be like a story where we try to chronologically move along. So he can't help himself. But between you've got Ehlers being a UFA. Vic, maybe you need to put Johnny in timeout. You got Iafallo, who's going to be a UFA. You've got Appleton, who's going to be a UFA. You got Neil Pionk, he's going to be a UFA. And those are all contributors to this Jets team and contributors to success. Maybe not sexy contributors, all of them, but they're contributors. Is this Jets team going to, is playoffs going to determine whether this team looks totally different next year? Because I see a lot of red and blue boxes which signifies UFAs and RFAs on cap wages for 25-26 for this Winnipeg Jets franchise.
Yeah, totally fair question, Colby. I mean, it's even bigger picture than that, right? I mean, at some point, if the core is not winning, you have to sort of make some alterations to the core. I mean, I know it's totally two different situations, but we talk about Buffalo and, wanting to, there's a lot of good pieces there, but for the Jets, those guys you mentioned are all, I think, interested in maybe sticking around, but it's going to be a matter of making the money work, right? I mean, I mentioned Buffalo because for Alex Iafallo, he's a very useful player who plays, you can play him up in the lineup, you can play him down, he kills penalties, he's on the second power play. He's a very useful player to the Jets. So at $4 million, does it make sense to keep him around as a fourth liner? I mean, the Jets rolled with Matthew Perreault in the fourth line for a while too, but to me, his value, although it's high for the Jets, he probably could play higher in the lineup on other teams like Buffalo, who has a ton of skilled players, but not a lot of two-way guys that can be a human eraser on the defensive side. Neil Pionk, he's one goal shy of his career high. A lot of points again. He's had a very nice bounce back season, much less chaotic in the defensive zone, and his partnership with his Hermantown, Minnesota buddy Dylan Sandberg has been excellent.
Yeah.
Do you want $7 million in an open market to play on a bad team, or are you going to be signing for, I don't know, 6.5 to 6.8 to stay on a team that you feel is a contender? They had their first child in Winnipeg. It's close to home. I'm not sure. I think the Jets are interested in all of those players, but I think to a degree, you're right. I mean, how you do, and if you can go on a magic carpet ride for 2 months, maybe it changes the feeling for some of those players. And for Ehlers, having another great year, Colby, but the pathway to a first line situation for him, it's hard to envision based on what Johnny was talking about. The way that Velarde fits with Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele, unless Kyle is gone after 1 year and it doesn't get extended, there's no clear pathway to being a first line player. So are you happy enough with just being promoted to the top power play? Or do you want to go someplace where you can be a top line player and maybe go, level up from being a 65-point guy to an 85-point guy? That's the biggest question for me with Ehlers. He's loved his time here in Winnipeg, his decade. But, I mean, you know what it's like, Colby? You want to be as high on the depth chart as you can, right? So if there's no clear pathway to being a first-line player, then you're probably wanting to at least listen to other offers. And it's a humongous playoff for Ehlers, guys. Only 4 goals and 14 points in 38 playoff games. So unfair or not, the knock has been he has not produced to the requisite level of regular season success when the postseason has arrived. A couple times,
it's just
right.
reality.
He's played hurt, but guys want guys who can produce when the chips are down. I think Nikolai Ehlers is an incredibly competitive person. I think sometimes to his detriment, those numbers have not been there because of the gripping your stick and trying too hard. But the other part of that equation is up to this year, he hasn't had first power play time. So, when you're not getting the popcorn and peanuts, you're not getting the easy ones, right? So in the playoffs, that's a huge thing, especially when the Jets have had a power play that spends almost the entire 2 minutes out there. So I don't think it's lack of interest, but I think there's got to be enough intrigue to at least want to listen to what the other teams are offering. And again, we look at the Jets and we see Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck, both getting those matching deals. Now with the cap going up as significantly as it is, does that number become one that can be passed by a Kyle Connor or someone else, or is that the internal cap, right? I mean,
they're so silly to me, Ken, because the market changes and dynamics change and dollar value changes and everything is so different. I've never been a fan of the whole, we have this salary cap and you can't make more than I think that's garbage in my opinion. I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way, because I think a lot of teams do it. I just think it's silly. Ask Colorado how they feel about their internal salary cap with, not wanting to pay Mikko Rantanen. Like, just how do they feel about it? Even though, sure, Natchez looks great in Colorado. I'm not saying it's the same. I'm just saying I personally think the whole internal salary cap thing is a silly way to go about your business. Just my opinion.
No, totally fair. It's sort of been something that in the past they've used, right? First with Wheeler and then, more recently with those guys. But again, Josh Morrissey's going to need a new deal. He's a bargain at $6 million. And
Is he ever?
again, sorry, we've gone almost half an hour here and not mentioned a guy who should be or not should be. He is in the heart of the Norris Trophy battle.
Seriously.
And again, yesterday, almost 26 minutes, goal and an assist, playing in all situations with Sandberg out. He got a little bit more penalty kill time. He's just had an exceptional year, guys. And, when a guy is having a year like he is having, coupled with Hellebuck, you owe it to your organization and to your players to go out and add. Again, 2022, I covered the Avalanche in the Western Conference Final and the final. I look at the 2022 template as what the Jets should be considering. What did Colorado do? They were a great team that had a ton of playoff misery. They got Josh Manson, big, stiff defenseman, filled a humongous need for them. Got Arturi Lehkonen. They had all kinds of offensively talented players, needed a two-way guy that comes down in the clutch. So, again, I'm not saying those players because they're not available, but those two areas are what the Jets should be looking for. And then the Colorado Avalanche also added Andrew Cogliano and Nico Sturm that year. I think the Jets are a little bit better situated with their depth on the forward group, but they could be looking for a guy with championship experience, can play a stiff game, but also contribute. So I sort of look at that model, and I look at 22 Avalanche as a great example and parallel for the Jets when it comes to, that year at the end of 21, the Avalanche were being called that team that can't get over the hump. Oh, you can't get out of the second round. What's wrong with your core? Fire your coach. I mean, it didn't make sense at the time, but they had to change the narrative, and that's how they did it, by going out and winning and putting all the pieces together.
It's the famous Nathan McKinnon quote. Been in this league 9 years and haven't won shit. Yeah, it's my favorite quote ever. I love that line. But Ken, I have one more question for you. And honestly, I'm sure you're sick of talking about it, but I feel like I have to just ask about it anyway. Because Colby and I are, he's Philly, I'm New York. We've been around Devils fans, Rangers fans. We hear it all the time from those fan bases about four nations. And like we've talked about guys like Adam Fox, Jack Hughes. I don't know. I haven't seen the Jets discourse about how Kyle Connor was maybe treated or how he performed. And I'm curious if the narrative of Winnipeg Jets fans around Kyle Connor changed at all from that tournament, because it shouldn't have, because he's a guy, I know there hasn't been a ton of playoff games outside like the early rounds, but he seems to produce in the playoffs almost every year.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it was a strange time for a guy to go cold. And honestly, guys, and you saw it in a one-shot game. No offense to Chris Kreider, I love the way he's played. I covered some of the playoff series, but don't tell me that Jack Eichel after the line swap was made wouldn't have loved to look to his left and seen a guy who is an automatic 30 burger player that has scored 47 and only needs one pass on his stick to end the game. So you guys have been around hockey a long time. At every level, there is some element of what you want to call it, politics, favoritism, whatever it is. Kyle Connor's not a U.S. National Development Team program player. He has played for them at the World Championship, but sometimes you just get caught in a little bit of a funk. And I honestly, Colby, I think that Jack Eichel is a perfect center for Kyle Connor, given all of the things that he does, being a right-hand shot, his ability to draw people to him and find a guy in a pop position to get a shot from the slot or somewhere dangerous. So I understand why they went to the Tkachuk brothers with Jack, and it worked when those guys were playing and healthy. But I think that Kyle Connor would have been perfect with Jack Eichel had they stuck with him a little bit longer. Now, I'm not taking Kyle off the hook. He had a tournament that was way too quiet for one of the best snipers in the NHL. He had one secondary assist, and I don't think he struggled. He doesn't struggle with the pace because he's a fast player, but in a lot of games, Kyle's one of the fastest players on the ice. And you guys saw that tournament was played at hyper speed, especially the games against Canada and the US. So one of his biggest assets or things that he makes him better than a lot of guys was sort of neutralized by the pace that the other team was playing at. So I think it's only going to motivate him. He said all the right things, but let's not kid ourselves. If you're the player of his stature and you're healthy, basically for the first time in maybe your life,
ever.
Certainly since turning pro, I can think of only one time when Kyle got benched, when Wheeler, Scheifele, and Connor were, I think, -4 in a game against Nashville where they sat the third period. But this is a guy who isn't used to that, but Kyle's not a guy that gets, at least visually or, in public, that gets rattled.
Yeah,
I
not
think
a
it's
lot of
something
emotion out of that guy.
I mean, I wouldn't say not a lot of emotion, but he doesn't show. Like, I know exactly what you're saying, Johnny. He just doesn't show it publicly.
Right.
I think this guy's is a guy who's super competitive, even though he's not running around trying to hammer guys. He plays a competitive game, and he would have been sour by how it turned out, even though he said all the right things and was trying to be a good teammate and had a good experience. I only, much like how Mark Scheifele handled not being on the team for Team Canada, I think Kyle is sort of on a I'm not saying the vengeance tour, but I am saying that having talked to Kyle, this was always the appetizer for the Olympics. This is a guy that doesn't want to be the guy that's replaced by, some young up and comer. He wants to be in Italy, and he wants to show Mike Sullivan and company that he can be a guy that Team USA can count on when the chips are down in Milan for a team that needed one more goal and didn't get it in the tournament.
Yeah.
Well, look, Ken, I got to say this to you as we wrap with you here. There are not any, and if there are, it's few that have the information and that cover a team as well as you do. I'll tell you this: I have a lot of issues with a lot of writers and the way that they cover their beats, and I vocalize them pretty consistently. And there's a lot of times Johnny wants to ask people to come on the show, and I tell them no, they're not coming on the show because they're clickbait writers. Your information goes so many levels, so many levels deeper. It's not surface level information. It's not quotes and stats. You truly cover the Winnipeg Jets. I think a lot of people are probably not super familiar with you in the US. I wasn't until Frank introduced us when I was in Chicago. So we truly appreciate the great work. We appreciate the amount of information you brought to our show today. We do have a group of people that are Winnipeg Jets fans that are in our chat every single day. They've been with us since day one. They're loyal. They get mad at us and say we don't talk about the Jets enough, which we don't. So seriously, Ken, I really appreciate your time today. I feel like I just got a little bit, a PhD on where the Winnipeg Jets are looking to move here for the next, I'd call it not just week, but 6 to 8 months. So we're really grateful for your time today.
Seriously.
Colby, thank you so much. Always enjoy talking to you when it was in the press box or otherwise. I love this sport. I was a failed Canadian university hockey player, failed as in being a 13th forward. And I sort of feel like I know how hard it is, even at that level. I'm not pretending to know how hard it is at the NHL level, but as someone who's been a healthy scratch frequently, I can kind of empathize with the players on the, on the periphery and guys who are going through tough times. And, still being on the ice with one of Johnny's buddies back in Winnipeg on a weekly basis. I know how hard it is just playing, putting that little biscuit in the back of the net when it comes to your fun hockey with your buddies. So I try to be as fair as I can. That doesn't mean that I'm not being able to be critical, but I love my job. I've been covering the Jets for 14 years. And best part of getting to the NHL, guys, I covered the American League for 10 years and I loved every minute of it. Being on the bus, traveling to 3-and-3s and places like Syracuse and the Onondaga War Memorial Arena.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it makes you much like those players when they finally make it. It makes you appreciate the journey and always love the sport. And I feel very fortunate to be able to cover it, but appreciate the kind words and always enjoy being with you guys. And even though it was the first time on camera, we'll definitely do it again.
Yeah, no, and you can catch Ken on DFO Live. You've made frequent appearances on there as well too. So Ken, thanks for your time today. We'll be following you on social media to see what Winnipeg does here the next couple of days.
Enjoy, guys. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, wow,
awesome guy.
My head is like, he covers that.
But he got so in depth. Like that was that
mean.
Doesn't do, we can't do the Jets justice by the way we talk about the Jets.
So many writers are surface level guys and they give you surface level answers, but you just ask Ken a question and he can carry it because there are so many layers to these things. Like I do feel like I just got such a deeper understanding without watching Winnipeg every single night, you know? So that was phenomenal. That really was. I hope all of our people, again, we don't dive into the Jets enough on this show. So I hope everybody sort of appreciated that because I thought that was awesome.
There was one thing though, sneaky Colby, that I didn't ask that I wanted to, but just because of timing, like it was tough to get there. I think it's so like, I don't know if low key is the word, but Mark Scheifele is third in the NHL in goals. Like that is something that I feel like you're not really hearing about. It's Leon Draisaitl who's ran away with it with the Rocket Richard. He's got 45, Nylander with 35, and then Scheifele's right behind him with 34 goals. Like, how that guy was left off Team Canada with, how he's played this year. We're not going to dive into it, but that is something that I feel like, is just very, very, very quiet in the NHL this year. And we know how good Scheifele's been, throughout his career. But, at this stage of it, being 31 years old, having arguably a career year, his career high is 84 in 2018-19, and he's at 68 right now with 20-ish games to go. Like he's going to surpass that at 31 years old. Like super impressive stuff,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. So we got to get to Bet365. And then we'll talk about the rest of the week real quick, Johnny. So what do we got for our friends at 365 today?
Jeremiah is going to love this one. Rangers Capitals on TNT tonight at Madison Square Garden, a potential first round preview, a huge matchup for the Rangers. Maybe not as big for Washington. They've proven themselves already here, but this is as big of a measuring stick game as you can get. But we're going with Alexander Ovechkin, anytime goal. How could you not at this point? I'm rooting for it. I want to see it. I want to see Ovi get one in person tonight. So it's at plus 110. Not like incredible odds here, but we're going with Ovi anytime goal. He's got 47 goals in 96 games in his career against the Rangers. So pretty much scoring at a 50% clip against New York. So we got to think that Ovi will get one tonight.
Okay. All right. So here's the word. No, I was looking over at my computer here. I had some notes that I wanted to get out there. Couple of little things here as we kind of move our way towards the end of the week. Again, give us a like on today's episode. We've had hundreds and hundreds of likes the last couple of days. Our numbers have been incredible. So we are grateful to all of you for the comments and the likes. If you're not live, hit the comment section. Johnny definitely reads the comments and sends them to Vic and I, especially the nasty ones. Tomorrow's show, I will not be here. I will also not be able to take part in trade deadline this year. I know I've done that the last couple of years. I've got some family stuff going on that I'm not going to get into. So I got to travel a little bit the next couple of days. So I think Jeff is going to sit in for me with Johnny tomorrow. If not Jeff, maybe it'll be Frank. We're not 100% sure on that yet, but I do think it'll be Jeff. Obviously, noon DFO live. This is the best week for it. 3 p.m. the sheet. I know they're still working on their guest for today, potentially Pierre Maguire, but that's not necessarily 100% yet. So again, a lot of content, a lot of instant reactions, a lot of instant analysis coming here over the next couple of days as we head into the trade deadline. You guys will be in great hands. 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Friday on everywhere Daily Faceoff streams their shows. So you definitely won't want to miss that. I know I'll be watching and trying to follow along with all that. Johnny will be involved in the trade deadline show the whole time this year. I think you and Nate Thompson, right? I think
and Irf, Irfan Gafar too.
Nate Thompson and Irf are going to fill in for me. So the good thing is Nate Thompson rips on Johnny as much as I do, at least privately.
Probably more.
So hopefully he brings that on the air, and you guys will like that and appreciate it. But listen, we've got Frank, who's the GOAT of trade deadline, and so you guys will be in great hands with all of that. And I know the network will do great things. And I know tomorrow's episode will be great. Anytime, Johnny and Jeff work together, there's great chemistry there.
Neil Smith too. Don't forget Neil Smith tomorrow.
Neil Smith, the the gentleman who almost got Joe Sakic to the New York Rangers, which when I said that to Johnny, you didn't even know that, right? You were like, what?
I had no idea.
Look that story up before you have Neil Smith
yeah.
on tomorrow, because that story is a fascinating story about the games that he played. So I will not see you guys until Monday. The network will have programming, obviously Morning Cup of Hockey tomorrow at 9 a.m. And then Friday, there will not be a Morning Cup of Hockey, but coverage will start 11 a.m. It will end at 4 p.m. and it will just run right through. There's player panel, opinion panel. We got Frank, we got Tyler. It's an all hands on deck. Affair for the Nation Network and for Daily Faceoff the rest of the week. So, Johnny, is there anything else that you would like to say before I say goodbye to everyone?
I feel like you don't want me to say anything anyway. So,
if you want to say something, I just gave you the floor.
Yeah, I was gonna say I did.
You looked like you wanted to say something, but you looked like you were actually respecting me telling you not to interrupt me when I'm exiting the show. That's why I came to you.
Yeah. So I tweeted out yesterday, not to pile on Devils fans here, but the odds already dropped. They were plus 1,000 yesterday. They're plus 870 now for the Devils to miss the playoffs. I put $300 on it to win $3,300. So I put my money where my mouth is yesterday, if anyone wants to ride that with me. And for the people that care about my dating life, I showed her the show yesterday. I was with her last night. I showed her the show. I showed her the chat. She's aware of all you guys, and she didn't run. So it's a good sign. It's going well.
Johnny dropped a little bomb on Vic and I before. So
What did I say?
You said you used a word that I'm not going to use just in case that she's listening, but you definitely really can I say it?
No.
Okay, so I won't say it just in case she's listening, but look how red his face is getting, everyone. Look at how red his face is getting. So.
She watched the clip yesterday of Frank with the Devils, and she was like, "Oh, I feel so bad. Everyone's being so mean in the comments."
Yeah, well, listen, that happens. But listen, New York Marine. Look, Johnny makes bad investments, so he bets with his heart, not his head, and that's what happens. But I am a little bit surprised because I know you are secretly a Devils fan. So, all right, listen, good show today. Good week so far. Great hands tomorrow. Even better hands Friday. I'll see everybody Monday. Make sure you guys are here to chirp Johnny. I'll get in the chat hopefully tomorrow. I'll have
we'll miss you. We'll miss you.
I'll have Wi-Fi on the plane tomorrow, so I'll get in the chat and I'll harass you as best as I can. So everybody, we hope you have a great day. Like us on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're not. Even if it's just a trial run, you'll see if you like it for the next couple of days, and then you'll make your decision. And other than that, we hope everybody has a great day, and get right back here for 9 a.m. tomorrow because we are headed to the trade deadline.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.